Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Chad Smith Podcast. My name is Chad Smith, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host and awesome friend, Mr. Big Willie.
How's it going, sir? Brother? It's going well. Going well. Got my raspberry tea with French vanilla creamer, so I'm excited.
Ooh, nice. I've got a little bit of, I don't even know what this is, an energy drink, but I threw it in my koozie. Nice. Chad Smith Podcast koozie.
Oh yeah, boys.
So yeah, this is a really fun one because we are covering another Michigan case. This one's going to be a UFO incident that happened here in Dexter, Michigan. And for anybody listening on the podcast side, the audio-only side, this is going to be pretty heavy with some graphics. So if you want to join us on the YouTube side, what'd you say?
So graphical.
Very graphical. So yeah, if you want to check out some of the graphics that we're going to be pulling up, you can check those out on YouTube, and the link will be in the description of the podcast. And so yeah, I guess we're going to get started here with, first of all, I wanted to cover some things just to get everybody familiar with the times. 1960. There's a lot of stuff going on that was different in 1960, so... I'm sorry, 66. So let me pull this up. So let's get everybody familiar with... Back in 1966, the average cost of things was a lot less, so... The average cost of a first-class stamp, talking 5 cents. A gallon of gas was 32 cents.
Sexy 32.
You could buy a house for $14,000.
This is just not right, reading this.
Your average income per year was $6,900. Just a cool, right under $7,000 a year.
69, what a solid number. This is amazing. I mean, these numbers are solid, Chad. The fact that you played all this out.
Let's see. Some 60s slang. Wow.
Oh, Jesus, we get in trouble here.
Give me some skin. Give me some skin, man.
Is that a high five, I'm assuming?
I think so, yeah.
I feel like that's what it would mean if someone said, give me some skin. I mean, I hope that's what they mean.
Oh, shake hands. That's what it says. Shake hands.
Oh. Okay.
Lay it on me. Tell me. Let's jam. That's when you're leaving someplace. Let's jam.
Oh. See, I would have thought that meant like dance.
Right? There's hang loose. It's like relax. Let's see some stuff that's on TV. Star Trek, the original series was coming out. Bewitched.
Yeah.
In the theaters, Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
Yeah, 1966.
You ever seen that one?
I haven't seen that.
You know the most famous music from that movie ever, though, right?
You probably have to tell me.
I can't whistle. I've set myself up for failure here. It's the it's the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme. It's the standoff, and wow, 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 wow. You don't know that?
Okay.
That piece of music?
Yeah.
That's like from that.
The Western.
God, I can't whistle. Why would I do that? Why would I even set myself up for that? Because it's a whistle. That's the whole thing. Exactly.
Like that.
That's the one.
The U.S. president, man, was Lyndon Johnson at the time.
Oh, man. The Big Johnson.
Big Johnson. World population, we're talking 3.4 billion. I think we just hit 8 the other day.
That's that alone. If you take nothing away from tonight, the fact that we were at 3.5?
3.420.
Okay, we're going to round up. We're not allowed, but we're going to round up but it could be 420. Let's round down. That's an even better number. We had 69 and 420 and 66, baby. Yeah. So, the fact that we're at that to 8 billion now, guys, unbelievable. And yet, here we are, 8 billion people, Chad. You, I, all these listeners, amazing
That's
people
a lot.
in chat.
A lot's changed. So, yeah, I thought there's a lot of information on just this one thing. Just to kind of get everybody familiar with the times of 1966, because a lot's different now. These are a couple things that were on the TV. Car 54, some Dean Swanson news. So this is what television looked like back in 1966. They did have color, but it was like a new deal. Like, for color so real, you'll think you're there.
I love that you have that, because that's so perfect. But wow, look what's on that TV with that kid.
Oh yeah, that's seems things were different then.
Things were different, and you know what? This is an important point to bring this up right now, because you guys, we're gonna have to remind ourselves again and again and again in this story that it was 1966. We have to do our best to try and view this through the lens of 66, because we know a lot now and a lot has happened. But at this time, and this is why we're kind of doing this a little bit here in the beginning, to just really help you understand times were different. And so when sharing the story, when hearing the story, imagine you were in 66. How would have you thought about things? How would have you interpreted it? And, kind of go forward listening to the story with that mindset. So, I mean, Chad, props to you for finding these, because these are amazing. It's really cool to see
thanks.
that glimpse back in time.
For all the automobile fanatics out there, since we are in Michigan, it's the home of the automobile. So this is like what the license plates looked like back then. Actually,
Love it.
We just changed over to that license plate again. The
Yeah,
same one, Winter Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Thunderbird and a Chevy truck, and that's what the 66 Bronco looked like back then. So definitely vehicles were different. And then here's the slide that I really like. If you wanted to get around to talking to people back then, there was no text messages, there's no video calls, FaceTime, none of that. No cell phones. These were your options.
Snoopy.
You had a Snoopy phone, maybe, a themed phone, or just your basic black phone right there with the dial on the front. You could use U.S. mail, of course, snail mail, get a message to somebody. And new in 66, the first fax machine. I believe it was the very first one. Mail letters over the phone using that machine right there. So getting information to somebody back then was a little different. A lot slower, and getting the word across town wasn't as fast.
At all.
For sure.
And people like to talk, right? That was the other big thing. I mean, you have to admit, that was how people wanted, you would end up in instances when stories were shared back then where it was a little bit of hearsay, and maybe you read something in the papers, and we're going to talk about that in regards to today versus then, because not a lot has changed in some ways, and some things were sensationalized for sure. And then you'd also have people putting their own little twists on it, adding things to when they would read something. So we're going to keep all that in mind. But yeah, good point on this. Good old snail mail.
Jake Smith in the chat says no RC trucks. Yeah, I don't know, man. To be honest with you, I really don't. I don't know.
Well, they had this super 3-wheel, maybe possibly 2-wheel postman patrol truck there. Look at that.
We're picking up any ladies in that thing.
Not. It was not built for the Michigan winters either, if I got to be honest. I don't see it being built for that. Yeah, so we have a couple things that, and first of all, if you're from Michigan, I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy this. It was a lot of things that I did not come across until several years ago myself. And the first time I ever heard the story, I fell in love with it. If you're familiar with UFOs at all, or following kind of the history of UFOs and the relationship that the U.S. government has had with them, it's impossible that you haven't come across Project Blue Book or Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the lead. Really, he was a lot of things. He didn't really claim the physicist thing too much, but I do believe he had a minor in that, as well as mainly being an astronomer was his biggest thing. But he headed up a lot of the program over the years. With several different people changing leadership at the helm there. But he was pretty steady through the whole thing. And so keep that in mind with him. But also, too, another fun thing that I did not know about was the fact that anybody who knows, if we say these names, if you're not in Michigan, they're not going to mean much. But if you are, then they'll mean something. But Monroe, Michigan was a pretty big deal because we almost lost it. But before we even get to that, I just have to share this because I think this is really cool.
Oh, man.
Okay. Chad already brought it up. Some things were going on in 66.
Yep.
It's right here. Ooh. Doritos.
Snacks.
Flavored. Snacks are important. And you guys know Big Willie likes his snacks. So he's got to talk about the snacks just a little bit. So yeah, we had Doritos coming out. Taco flavored was the very first year, right? And then as Chad mentioned, as far as shows that were out there on TV at the time, we had Star Trek, right? It was the first year that this one really hit. And to me, that was a pretty big deal. And if we think about the idea of this, perhaps slow conditioning or making people comfortable with the idea through media or perhaps movies and things of that nature. One could hypothesize, although it was great science fiction, that Star Trek was a slow fade into this idea of making us not only maybe comfortable with the idea of there being other life perhaps even, but at least the idea of us getting off this planet eventually. I think it really planted a seed in some people where we are now seeing that being as a very real possibility here in the future for very least some could say our children, if not for sure our grandchildren. So anyways, that was what was going on in 66, as well as some of the other things that Chad mentioned. But
there's
go ahead, Chad.
One thing that I forgot to mention back on that other slide with this picture here. Up in the top right under technology, it says NASA launches the Lunar Orbiter 1, which was the first U.S. spacecraft to orbit the moon. So the huge year for that.
Very true.
Also, the unmanned Soviet Luna 9 spacecraft made the first controlled rocket-assisted landing on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things were happening as far as space goes.
That's going to play a big factor into this. So just keep that in mind. We were at the height of the Cold War, one could say, in 66. So there was a lot going on. There was a lot competing on, obviously, on a national. At this point in time, Kennedy already made, the big statement about getting to the moon and us being the first. And so we were in the middle of the space race as well as the Cold War with the Soviets. And there was a lot of tension. And some of that could be talked about another time, whether that was all legitimate or if some of that was placated a little bit. But that's a show for another time. However, it was going on. So anything that was reported in the sky or things that people seen, a lot of times people did play off as, something from those guys on the other side, right? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But really quickly, we'll jump into just a little bit here. And then, Chad, you might have to slide them along as I'm reading just a little. I'm not going to read much of it, but we did almost lose Monroe, Michigan, guys. And it was actually how it was worded at one point in time. I'm going to pull this up here. Here we go. And obviously this article is a little bit older from the Free Press because it says it was 50 years ago today. That is not accurate. That Monroe County was the site of the worst nuclear incident at U.S. commercial power plant years before the 3 Mile Island captivated the nation. The incident occurred around 3 p.m. at the new defunct Firma 1 plant in Frenchtown Township near Monroe and involved the partial meltdown of a nuclear fuel in the reactor's core. No one was hurt, and no dangerous radiation released in the October 5th, 1966 mishap. However, the plant remained shut down for nearly 4 years. It reported on July 7, 1970, but then was permanently shut for economic reasons in 72 after producing just a trickle of electricity. So apparently wasn't really doing that much for us. Anyways, but the reason I bring this up is because, and I don't know what all photos Chad may have shown here or not shown, but, here we go. So I'm going to slide over to the next one. So this is kind of what was looking like at the time. No, that's okay. So this is the actual site photo. These were the guys when they were still actually working in there at the time, which I believe you can go and visit. It is set up as I think Chad and I took a peek
museum?
At that. Yeah, a little museum that you can go look at. But obviously it wasn't doing that well, apparently.
Yeah, that was the reactor. I believe that was right before they were, like the day they were installing it. That thing is creepy looking.
Mm-hmm. Eddie Askell brings up another good point about 66. You had the height of a lot of things going on. You had the Cold War. You had Vietnam was going on. So some of these things kind of got lost in the history. But I thought being in Michigan, they would have taught us about this. That, like, guys, we almost lost Monroe, Michigan. And it could have had unbelievable effects on the Great Lakes, which supply a lot of the nation's water in some ways and some things that people don't always talk about. So it's just worth noting. And one of the other things is, might I perhaps be leaning towards the idea that there's a chance that aliens are real or UFOs? Maybe. And so one could speculate and has speculated that there is a relationship with nuclear reactors and unidentified flying objects. Okay, and that's something that if you've done any sort of research into this, you'll find is common. And if you haven't, I would just encourage you to maybe go take a peek at it and see if you find a correlation there. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
We get ready to move on here. Now, I'm going to take this down here because there we go. Okay. I can remember exactly what picture was next. So this is good old Dexter, Michigan, which at the time in the nation, just before I bring this photo up, actually I'm going to bring it up anyways because this is I love this photo. So this is Dexter, Michigan at the time. Chad, I think you even made the comment because, guys, Chad, why don't you tell them about this really quick while I'm getting something else squared away? You don't work too far away from here, right?
Yeah, actually, I'm probably about 2 miles from where this picture was taken. And if you drive down there right now, it actually doesn't look a whole lot different. You know, a lot of the buildings are still intact. Obviously, the cars are going to look way different, but as far as the street goes and the buildings look, it's very similar to what it looks like right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would like to say a couple things before we dive into this. I still have original notes. Okay? I really do have original notes from years ago when I covered this. Because I was telling Chad before we decided to do this episode, it's kind of strange to me that this case was such a phenomenal case in my personal opinion. And yet there was little to no documentation outside of you'll pull up something and maybe it has 1 page, on a PDF, or there's a 6 or 7 minute video that somebody's tried to put together. I think the University of Michigan has done some. And I sit here and I look at this case and I go, there's no reason that this thing should not have, a well-written 4 to 5 page PDF. And honestly, personally, could have spurred some, you could even say, at least 1 season of a series of some sort on Netflix or whatever from the events that occurred from this, because it was pretty big, guys.
Yeah.
Leading up to this particular event, there have been sightings, a rash of what they call a UFO flap across the nation, not just in Michigan, across the nation at this time. However, in Michigan, there was a ramping up to the event we're going to specifically talk about here in Dexter, where many law enforcement officers had been sighting things. As a matter of fact, there were a couple officers, 4 of them, that will be involved in the story later, who actually took photos. Some of the very first photos. For some reason, this particular photo gets swept under the rug, and one other one is the one that's highlighted. In regards to this particular story. So, again, we don't always know what they were seeing, but we do know that people were calling. This was a time when you could just call your local airline, your local Air Force, and just be like, "What's up? Let's put this in here." Swamp Dweller, what's up, brother? Thank you for being here tonight. So, anyways, 1966 is what we have going on here. We have Dexter, Michigan, and let me go ahead and slide over here. Okay, so first pictures of lights taken by Officer Robert Hunwell in Michigan. Now, I understand, guys, these are not the greatest photos. We have to keep this in mind. This was 1966. Even though the officers had this, I still would sometimes challenge people that if you take a picture at night, even with a kind of a great cell phone nowadays, at night, outside, sometimes you don't get the greatest photo, especially if what you're taking a picture of is giving off a lot of images. So they took this particular photo, and for whatever reason, this one always kind of gets swept under the rug. No one really talks about this one. A matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll look this up here in a little bit, I do believe it was Hunwell or perhaps Fitzpatrick, one of them. I think it is Hunwell, though, that draws a depiction of what he's seen in regards to the event over there in Dexter at the Mannor farm. But this happened several days prior to the big event that we're going to talk about. So this just goes to show, and again, I can't quite see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Technically, there's 14 little, we'd say, lights in this. Now, Chad, I just got to ask you, if we see this nowadays, we could probably chalk that up to the old Elon Musk stuff up there, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't it look very similar?
Yeah, it does look like just satellites or something flying through the space there, but we both know that wasn't going on back then.
That we know of public knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. Because I still like to, attack even my own position on things and believing stuff. Mm-hmm. That we know of, there was no technology in place at the time for this.
Yeah, like we said, this was the year that NASA launched the first lunar orbiter 1. So this was supposed to be like the first U.S. spacecraft to orbit the moon. And so if we only had one of those orbiting the moon at the time, we probably didn't have 6 to 10 other satellites orbiting the planet. So who knows?
I would think not. But like you said, we don't know for sure, right. And I don't want to be too presumptuous. But let me do just a hair of reading here, and then we're going to jump into what was going on with Frank Manor. So, and let's see, pull this up. Here we go. So Dexter made national news 56 years ago with reports of strange lights in the sky and flying saucers. The government discredited scores of eyewitnesses with its famous dismissal of the incident as marsh gas, better coined later on as swamp gas. So, a retired UFO or Force senior engineer and Detroit native who writes about UFOs believes records he has analyzed prove aliens flew a UFO across southern Michigan that night. He writes about it in his book, Swamp Gas My Ass. I spoke at length with Mr. Seisminsky, specifically about the Dexter incident. So, this brings us, Smansky, thank you. So this brings us into basically the evening, March 20th, 1966. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe those photos, the one I showed you a minute ago, I believe this one we're looking at right now, I believe this was taking the 15th or 16th, something like that, several nights prior to what went down at the Frank Manor farm. So this right here, I'm going to pull this up, is Frank Manor and his son, Ronald or Donald. I believe it was Ronald, actually, or they just call him Ron, being interviewed, obviously, but this is the gentleman whose farm this took place at, and Chad and I have some plans, I just want to say, we got some plans, but we did find the location, guys, the exact location. We pulled it up on a map. We're going to talk about this later, but anyway, so Frank and his son here are pictured, and to kind of put you guys in the mood, it was kind of the evening time. He had come back from a walk. I love it. Yeah, that was a great book, right? Great title. And if you guys want a much more in-depth study of it, it's a great book to get. So I'll see if I can look that up before the episode's over and put a link in the chat for you guys. But at the time they were having dinner, and Frank, as most people back then, had 10 children, okay, and they were all having dinner. And they had, I think, 6 dogs as well. And they were actually getting ready to watch some television because they had that brand new color, baby. They were ready to rock and roll with whatever was rolling in 66, right? And the dog started kind of going crazy. And so he decided to go take a peek outside. Keep in mind, it was this is some of the important things. It was a very dark night. It was not bright at all. There was no full moon. There wasn't much of a wind. Only they estimate between 3 and 8 miles an hour. And he sees this giant craft lighting up and doing different things. And it looks, in his opinion, and we're going to play a clip here in a second, actually, let you guys hear it in his own words. But he said it seemed to be almost sputtering, like it was having issues staying afloat. And here's where it gets a little confusing. And like I said, there's several different articles, and they all have little twists on the story in this part, as well as even my own notes. Some have said it was accompanied by 2 other crafts with this one. I didn't see that. And even in the research we've done with Frank here and that Chad and I looked up, we didn't really see where he's talking about several crafts. He only talks about one. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to lean on the basic statistical numbers here and say that there are more reports of him only talking about one craft versus several. But basically he walks out and he sees this thing doing some stuff. So Chad, whenever you're ready, I'm going to drop this here for you. Okay. And I'll give you a second to get ready over there. And we're going to play a little clip for you guys so you can hear in Frank's own words, and then we'll continue to tell the tale here.
Well, first beginning, we were watching television, and we have 6 dogs here, and they started raising a fuss, in which they never do much. So I went outside and gave a yell at them, and as I turned around to come back on the porch, I looked to the north of me, and looked like a fallen star. Radar. It was red and kind of coming down, and on about a 45. And so then I watched it, and I was going to see if it landed, and then maybe go down and see what it was. And when it got to the top of the trees, it stopped, and a blue and a white light come on it. And I looked at it, and I thought I was seeing things. Well, first beginning, we were watching television, and
so essentially, sorry, Chad. So essentially, that's what he's seen, right? Which, personally, guys, I have to admit, I love watching. Like, the fact that this is the weird thing about this case. There are several clips we're going to play over the night of the actual incident, thanks to, I believe, a special that was a CBS did with Walter Cronkite, I believe, if I'm not mistaken on that. Mm-hmm. That we have some of this footage, and we'll throughout this story be sharing some of that with you, where we can at least. Which, Chad, I don't know if we have to put up the little disclaimer. I know you guys have it written and saved in here somewhere about this being fair use. I don't think we'd get in trouble, but just in case, I believe 1974 or whatever year it was, we are doing fair use. This is for educational purposes. We're not seeking to gain any monetary gain out of this, so I don't know if you got to put anything else up there in regards to that.
I'll just put this up for a second in case.
There we go. We'll do that when we're doing some videos for now. We're trying to do the right thing here, YouTube. Be nice. So,
We're trying
So
to
he
do
has
the
these-
right thing.
He's red, blue, and white flashing lights. God bless the USA, red, white, and blue, baby. I'm just kidding. So this thing's having issues, and it kind of flies back into his swamp. Now, I do believe in from him, even though it looked like he was having issues, there was no sound emitted from this, right? So him and Ron, his son, decide to grab their lanterns for whatever reason and just chase this thing into the swamp or his wooded land he had there. And as they're pursuing this out, his wife, I did miss her name, was pretty nervous about this and basically calls law enforcement and says, hey, you know, I can't remember if she worded this along the lines of she wasn't sure what it was or she thought it could be Russian, you know, like that kind of deal. But Frank and Ron are running out into the swamp here, and I'm pretty nervous. I'd like somebody to come check this out, okay? At this point, 2 officers were dispatched, I believe, if I remember correctly. Let's see, at this point in time, it was Buford. These are the names. Robert Hunter and Buford Bushrow. So they were on their way to the particular incident, as well as, if I remember correctly, it was Hunwell, and then I believe Fitzpatrick was the other one that was out there. I think Fitzpatrick actually might have been the first one, right?
I think so, actually.
Yeah.
Fitzpatrick was.
They were the first ones coming out there, and they apparently got dispatched pretty quickly or were in the area or something, because I want to say it was a matter of, they think, 8 to 12 minutes that they were on site. Mm-hmm. And I didn't pull this up either as far as how big the Frank Manors farm was at the time acreage-wise, but it sounds like they were out there for a little bit. Give or take, it sounds like this incident lasted, we're going to say, about a half hour. And events this evening, a little sparse too. We're not 100% clear on the timeline, whether it was like between 8 and 10 p.m., somewhere in there, but we know it was dark, and they were heading out there. But as these 2 officers are driving in, they can see lights flickering up and on, right? And at one point, they talk about what they said was a craft coming over top of them, hovering over top of their vehicle, and they described it, Chad, if I'm not mistaken, as the size of a small house. Is that correct? Or a small home?
Yeah, that's what I saw, too.
Yeah, which is,
So,
what would you guesstimate if you had to just think about a small house? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I hear a small house, I just picture like a small little log cabin, so probably 15 by 15 by, 20 foot tall, maybe 15 foot tall. So it's pretty big. I mean,
Pretty decent size, right?
Yeah.
So, so at this point, let's see, I'm gonna pull this back up. Okay, here we go. I had too many tabs open. I got lost. All right, I'm back.
Doing this kind of
Oh,
stuff.
where am I? I'm lost. All right, guys. So at this point, the craft then heads back towards Frank Manor's property. So I know we don't have a great illustration here, so we're going to use basically the map you're looking at here. Frank Manor and his son are coming in from the south, and you have the officers and them coming in from the north, converging? Is that the word? I don't think that's a word, is it? Conversion into the location in the center. The officers did lose it. They said they would see it light up and it would shoot up. Some of them described it, shooting straight up, and would shoot straight down in an instant, and then straight back up, and then straight back down. Frank and his son at one point actually seen it, what they thought, completely land, and as they were kind of coming up over a hilltop there, they heard what they described as the sound of a bullet ricocheting. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this. Chad, I don't know if we saved an audio piece for that. If we didn't, that's okay.
I didn't save it to the
That's
board.
all right. So, guys, anybody who's never heard the sound, it's not so much the classic weird sounds that we hear from the movies. They're like, ching. This is more of the sound of when a bullet hits something and then it actually comes back at you. There's a couple crazy videos you can look up where, if you type in, like, bullets coming back at people or sniper shoots and it comes back, there's a very distinct kind of whistling wind sound that it makes. It's different than just the standard you shot when they hit something.
Yeah.
But this was the sound that they were hearing. And then it appeared at one point to just disappear. It shot up and it was gone. And at this point in time, like I said, they were there for enough time that 2 more officers were dispatched, which were Buford and Bushrow, as well as Robert Hunter. And they seen the lights going directly up, but they never seen much more than that around the time of them arriving. So they correct me, I got a note here. They seen 4 lights over them, Hunwell over them, silent. And so it hung over them silently, over talking about Bushrow and Hunter, and then it was gone. And when they met up to talk, they asked them about those lights, and they didn't even know lights were over them at the time. They said the last they'd seen, they were going into the swamp, essentially. So That's where we're at this point. Now, Chad,
Sir.
if you were there in this moment, in this scene, what do you think your response would be initially? And the same for you guys in the chat here. What would be the things you would be trying to process and or do in the time and era of 1966?
Well, I feel like in 66, I've probably already heard about the stuff that was going on in 44, 45, something like that.
You're talking about Roswell, 46?
Roswell,
yeah.
46. So the UFO thing would still be in the back of my mind, and especially for me, since I believe in that kind of stuff, I would definitely be thinking like, hey, I think we have a UFO on our hands. This might be something that the government might try to cover up. And I guess what would be going through my mind is like preservation of evidence, because knowing what happened back in 46 when the government just like swooped in, grabbed all the evidence and was driving out with it, at this point in 66, I'd probably be thinking like, we should probably write down and jot down as much information as we can about this, and maybe grab some pictures of the scene.
To do what you can, right?
Yeah, just to try to preserve what we see and what we can save at the time, just in case something or somebody comes in black outfits and black cars and swoops in and grabs all the evidence.
Well, and let's talk just a hair about what it looked like a little bit too. So I'm going to skip ahead here just a hair before I even bring up this other thing. And so here's a depiction of what was drawn by the officers afterwards. A matter of fact, they had this to say about it. The police report states Frank Manor and his son, Ronald, plus 40 to 60 others, including 12 policemen. Now, it's going to make sense in a second why it's saying 40 to 60 and 12 policemen, because we just talked about 6 gentlemen, okay? However, Frank himself did say his family seen it, neighbors were seeing it, so maybe that number's not off, but I can't guarantee it for you guys. Saw hovering over swamp about 1,500 feet away, a brown, luminous, car-sized object. And this is where it gets weird, because remember a minute ago, we had them saying the size of a small house.
Yep. I
guess if we were saying what you were saying, though, Chad, with a small, long-sized cabin, perhaps that could fall in the category of a car-sized object. And especially since the cars in 66, baby,
giant.
They were giant boats, right? Now, here's the description on this. It said, with a scaly or waffled surfaced, cone-shaped on top, flat on bottom, or a football-shaped, and 2 bluish-green lights on right and left edges that turned bright red and helped illuminate the object in between. Lights blinked out, and the object reappeared instantly across the swamp 1,500 feet away. So we do this, gone, over here, right? The whole object lit up with a yellowish glow at one point, and also rose up to 500 feet, rose up to 500 feet, then descended again. After 2 to 3 minutes of viewing, when 2 flashlights appeared on the distance, the object seemed to respond by flying away at high speed directly over the witnesses, with a whistling sound like a rifle bullet ricocheting. Object remained in the swamp area for roughly a half hour. Scores of credible eyewitnesses also saw the flying objects that night. The Dexter sighting was just one of many in southwest Michigan for 2 weeks in March 66. However, the Dexter incident drew national attention, and it was a turning point that thrust the UFOs into the public spotlight. And that's where a lot of articles just cut off. They're just like, yeah, some stuff happened, and then that was it. There was so much more than this, guys. So that's where we're going to do our very best to share some of this with you to the best of our ability. If we do get something wrong, please let us know, or let me know if I shared something that was inaccurate, because I would love to. Man, we need to find a good writer, and maybe they've already done that with that book, and really put it into, like, I love just a beautiful article that people could read over that shares more than what some of these short ones have done. So
something that brings everything together, because like you said, all the information that we're going to present to you is just grabbed from all kinds of different articles. So it would be nice to have one piece of evidence or one piece of literature that just has all this stuff in it without having to go to other sources.
Very true. Let's see. So what else? So after this, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. So that's where most articles, like I said, if you read on them, basically end. But let me make sure I get this right. So this was the very next night. So the very next night you have John Manningham, Strange Light. So March 21st, this is where the Hillsdale College incident takes place. And like I said, again, they might have been accurate in that police report. Then I want to say maybe they are, because they're saying 40 to 60 people that reported it, but that could have been it flying around. People were calling in. maybe that number is accurate. I've heard estimates over this flap time, or this period, 2 to 3 week period, that there were hundreds. Some said between 400 and 600 reported cases that people called in. Many of those reporting the same sighting, but you had that many people that were moved enough. And keep this in mind, guys. 66. Chad, drive home with the feeling of people sharing, were UFOs cool in 66? Were you getting more viewers and more subscribers for talking about aliens?
No.
I was going to say,
no.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is a time when, if you were talking about aliens, it was like the little green men type thing. So you were, especially in a professional setting, you were made fun of or criticized for seeing stuff in the sky that, you can't explain. So it wasn't like today where we're doing a bunch of YouTube shows, and the more that you talk about them, the more subscribers you get, the more popular you are. Back then, you were kind of crazy. And 100%. People didn't want to share their sightings. Nobody really wanted to talk about it back then.
Very true. By the way, Chad, I'm so sorry. I just noticed. Did we have music, or am I? Oh, you do. I think I do hear it. I'm sorry.
There is some.
I just had to listen
music.
for it. Okay. I'm sorry about that.
I just have some playing back there.
I remember. I thought you said you were going to play something. I was like, oh my gosh, we forgot. But
I even have the police department ambience.
Nice. Ooh. Okay. Well, let's get into this. So really quickly. So in the very next night, March 21st, we have the ladies at Hillsdale College. And we're going to play a clip from them in just a minute here, but let me give some foresight. And this is all based on good old Big Willie's notes from back in the day.
Big Willie notes.
Big Willie notes. So March 21st, we had the Hillsdale College incident. We had Barbara Cohn, who was the first one to really cite this. And the events took place, they estimate, between 10 p.m. till 4 a.m. Again, the ladies described it as a smashed football with red and green lights on this one. So they had slightly different color. Go ahead.
I'm glad that you said that, because the video clip that I want to play before the Hillsdale College one, the Officer Snyder clip that you sent me.
Oh, yeah.
It shows that the coloring on that drawing. So
very nice. Oh, yeah. And that's one we can certainly play, because we can play both of those before. I guess we'll play them in a row. But yeah, the events at the college, basically this thing showed up. Barbara Cohn was actually, I guess you could call her the den mother. And who was the other one? Sarah Robachek was another one, which is a couple of the ladies that they are going to show in this. And his assistant dean of women was Kelly Hearn. So Barbara Cohn was the first one who noted it, seen it, pointed out to Sarah Robachek, and wanted her to come and look at it in the window. But Sarah was more concerned about her, apparently, studies. She took a quick peek at it and was like, eh. And went back to what she was doing. Yeah. And then was like, it really kind of ate at her. And so she went back, and they actually used a telephone pole to track its movements. They were so concerned the first time, I do believe it was Barbara Cohn, who called. This was back when you could just call people. Let me pull this up here. They called William Van Horn. Oh my gosh, that is a terrible pixelated picture.
That's how big the pixels were back in 66. We're talking 1-inch pixels.
Oh boy, I'm sure there are better pictures of William Van Horn out there. I don't think that one quite edited out the way I wanted it to.
Hopefully he's not watching this in a couple of years and he's like, damn it,
we also have a video of him that we'll talk about this in a minute. But they first called him, or tried to call him, and they actually got his wife. At the time, he was the Department of Defense, I believe, in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. But you could just call in these people, and they were so concerned that they called and said, hey, we think we got aliens, bro. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they were like, I think we got aliens, bro. And she was like, actually, I think what they officially said was they wanted to know if a helicopter was having issues, because the Selfridge Air Force is not too far from the Hillsdale College there. As well, I believe Hillsdale has its own college, or excuse me, I say college, airport. But there is the Selfridge Airport in the area. So they thought maybe it was a military thing, exercise, or like a helicopter having issues, because it was doing the same movements. These bloop, 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 up and down movements, right? And it's exactly what it did. No sounds were heard by anybody, but I picture it as bloop, bloop.
There's no sound, though.
No sound. But in my head, that's the sound I'd be making. Every time it moved, I'd be like, bloop, bloop, bloop.
Oh, there it goes.
It goes high, it'd be higher, like, and then below it. That's how it works. So, anyways, his wife, Mrs. Van Horn, assured him that you guys are fine, nothing going on. But I'll let you know. And the reason Mr. Van Horn wasn't home is because he was actually at the Frank Manor farm investigating what was going on there at the time.
Yeah.
Because remember, that was the night before. Van Horn's got a lot on his hands at the time, okay? So he's out at the Manor farm trying to figure out what was going on there. And, we were hearing all these different sightings. He's had law enforcement officers in the area talking about these things. So he's busy, okay? The ladies call a second time. So they think, again, these events taking place between 10 and 4 a.m., or 10 and 4 a.m., so 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. They call a second time. Mrs. Van Horn assured them again, you guys, it's okay. But if somebody's in the area, they can, or actually this time she said, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You guys are fine. But then she did call her husband, or called out to the Manor. I guess she knew them or something, because she did call out to say, hey, she called the airport itself. Said, listen, I'm getting calls from the ladies at the Hillsdale College. It's late at night, right? Yeah. What's going on? You guys got something going on that they're aware of? No. Because this is back when you could just call your Air Force up.
Let me just call the Air Force for a second and see what they got going on.
They got something going on. You guys got any military exercises going on over there?
Hi, Air Force. This is Chad Smith. I'm seeing some stuff in the sky, and I don't know what it is. You guys got anything?
Yeah, you can't just call up your local radar technician right now and ask him what you got going on the radar.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, they did, I believe, the third and final time they call. And that's where it gets a little grimy, too. We're not clear on whether they got to speak to actually Van Horn himself or if they spoke to his wife again. But this is where they got Kelly Hearn involved, who was the den mother. She finally showed up, and she actually used to be, she wrote for a newspaper for 7 years prior to this in the local area. So she was able to start documenting things and instructed the ladies to basically do the best that you could, right? And we're in 66. Apparently, and this is a point of contention, it's going to come up later, no one had a camera. No one took a photo. That ends up being a big issue for people later on. However, they did document the best they could on shape, color, size, and all those things. So that is what was going on at the time. Really quick here. So calls the police for them. Oh yeah. So Mrs. Van Horn, the third and final time, also called law enforcement to send out to them. So Van Horn with them heads on out to the. Was heading to the farm. Was actually heading to them at approximately 1 a.m. And on the way in, him and the officers, as they were moving in, says that the craft actually started to fly over top of them and flew along with them for roughly 100 yards as they could see them coming in. And the ladies were freaking out when they got there because they were asking, did you guys see it? Did you see it? And they were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. We didn't see anything. And they're like, guys, it was, they guess within 100, they say a couple 100 feet over top of it. We're talking low to the ground here, 500 feet maybe. Okay. Mr. Van Horn at first thinks they're full of it, even though it says that they had between guesstimation 62 to 87 people that seen it at the college at this time. But then at this point it reappeared, and that's where he himself, Mr. Van Horn, was this gentleman right here. Looked a little different back then, but it was him. Now with the look he made, he was like, yes, brothers, they have come for me.
This is my time.
This is my time. I'm going to take this down. Gordium, brother, good to see you.
I'm going to read this actually, too. Eddie Haskell points out that in 66, many people had heard of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction from 61, but Roswell was a big secret into the 90s. So that's pretty interesting.
That it was. Mm-hmm.
Not many people had cameras in 66.
And that is another fair point. But like I said, it'll be a point of contention, so we'll bring it up later. Oh my gosh, Wayne, good to see you, brother.
Hey, how's it going? Wayne and Michelle. Michigan UFO sightings and paranormal encounters. Go check them out.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, at this point, they're using now the telephone pole as a gauge. Okay, so Mr. Van Horn himself, 2 law enforcement officers, as well as all the college ladies are witnessing this. Roughly 4 a.m., it finally leaves, and that's it. Okay. We're going to back up just a hair here. Now, Chad, what are your feelings on... Well, let's do this first before I talk any further. Let's play the video from Fitzpatrick, as well as the ladies from the college.
This is going to be from Officer Snyder.
Yes.
So, let's see.
But Sergeant Newell Snyder of the Sheriff's Office remembered it well enough to draw it.
No, it moved very rapidly at any speed, or rather any direction it wanted to go. Why it could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
There's the red and green shades that they mentioned.
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
But so
Yeah, if they called it a flying saucer, then that's what it is. Flying saucer. And then this will be the ladies from the Hillsdale College there in Michigan. This was the day after, I believe, right?
This is unclear. This might have been done for the special when Walter Cronkite covered it several years later, so they might have gotten them back together. But this is the original ladies, Sarah Robichek, Kelly Hearn, as well as Barbara Cohn. Some of the other ones, the names I don't have. But yes, this is the core group that were the ones writing and tracking it down and had been making the phone calls to Van Horn.
Well, when I was looking out the window with the binoculars, I guess it was about 12, I saw it, and I saw 2 red lights, and I saw what looked to be shaped like a pie. I could just see the front of it, and I just saw the round front, and I could see the lights on either side. And then the red light was sort of casting a glow over the whole thing, so it looked like a round disc.
At first, when I'd heard the other girls talk about it, I believed them, yet I couldn't really make myself comprehend it because I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But then when I saw it, I just was fascinated. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to stay there and keep my eyes glued to it. I couldn't leave.
I know I saw it, but, and I know myself I saw it, but I believe I saw it, but I can't fathom it because it seems so unreal.
Well, when I...
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a raw take on it. I mean, and again, I'm going to back up just a hair, and I'm going to show those photos that Fitzpatrick's talking about, but similar, right? Giving this idea of a squished football. His was a little more of a crude drawing, but this right here is the official one that was done by Hunwell. So even though that is the one that they showed, which no disrespect to his drawing and art, I'm not an artist myself. I can barely draw a stick figure, okay? But his was kind of just like, well, it was like, grit and green. This one, as you can see in this photo, is much more detailed. You see these details into the way it's the cone shape? Because that, and I know this isn't great how it looks right now, but, he talked about it. I imagine when we sent up, satellites, that technology they have to use, and I believe it had to do something with the heat and the way it deflected it, and that's why we made it that way when we make ours. But that pattern screams that to me, as far as that being on there. So anyways, that's what had happened at the time. So the next day, Van Horn, who believes he's got a real issue on his hand now, right? He is, after all, the civil defense director of the state of Michigan, the Wolverines, baby. So he gets a hold of Congressman Vivian West. What a name. How can you lose with the name Vivian West?
Mr.
Let's
West.
be honest. Mr. West. I feel like we had a better picture of Vivian West than we did of William Van Horn.
Yeah, he's definitely not as pixelated.
No. Not at all. So Vivian West, he gets in touch with the Defense Department to investigate the issue, essentially. That looks like swamp gas, that's right. And at first they took things kind of serious. So here was one of the first initial headings, okay, when this was going on. Oh, I apologize, guys. Hang on a second here. Let me skip back here. So one of the first ones they put out was this. So, strange flying objects sighted. That was kind of what was circulating in the press at the time. The witnesses see them zoom. Explanation sought. Okay? So, and you can see in this even, it gave the times, the 4:30 to 45 minutes, 2 or more appeared in deputy said, right? And it gave all these details. So that was kind of the feeling initially until Vivian West got involved. And it wasn't his fault at all because he did the right thing. He went up, up the line, as it were, went up the brass and said, all right, guys, I think we've got a real issue going on here. Because at this time, we had many, many phone calls. Like I said, it's estimated between 400 and 600 or more that people had called in. And that's just the ones that to be clear on that, those are ones that people got documented. Because there might have been people calling in and they just were like, yeah, sure, hung up their Snoopy phone for all we know. And then they just didn't take that call back. So this is where things move over to Project Blue Book. All right? For you guys, we're not going to do a whole episode on Project Blue Book, but in a nutshell, they were formed to investigate with a scientific foresight and lens on what was going on with these weird, UFOs in the nation, right? Which was all, in their opinion, Boulder Dash. Now, they didn't say that exactly, but that's what it came out to. Now, in the original days, Project Sign, Project Grudge, some of those ones, those seem to have, and even in the early years of Project Blue Book, there was a real push for like, hey, we want an answer. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who you can see if you're watching, posted, I believe, in the bottom right. How does that work for them? Is that the right corner or left corner?
It should be in the bottom left corner.
Okay, it's the bottom left corner for me too. Okay, so he was tasked with the duties of figuring out these answers, and as things progressed, he himself, who was very based in things just being scientific, astrology, the not really being a believer, although there was evidence that when he was really young, he did get very sick, and he spent a lot of time reading books in regards to all the worldly things. So it's up for debate. However, from what we've seen as he progressed through his academics and academia, he was not. He was a very solid man. There are facts, and there's a plausible and reasonable answer for everything, right? And so he was tasked with coming up with these ideas, and it took him after a while. He started to have a hard time justifying all of them because they got to where the U.S. Air Force, especially at this time, and we'll get into him in a minute here, Major Hector Quintanilla, who was heading up Project Blue Book, he was like, get an answer out there that will sound scientific enough, but move on, right? We just need an answer. So he sends out, at this point in time, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So we're going to pull up a photo of him here. And he got sent, actually, first, I'll hold this, to Selfridge Air Force Base. This is where he was going to be based, along with William Van Horn, the one we showed you that had about 2 pixels. That is where he was sent. So he is going to meet him there. And I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look this up, March 22nd is when, from my old notes here, the old school book. So Dr. J. Allen Hynek showed up March 22nd at Selfridge Airbus to go over these cases. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chad.
I was going to say, this is the place that Jake and I went to for the air show this year, and we actually got locked out of the
locked out.
We had to walk around the whole perimeter of this place just to get back in. It was
it's huge. I didn't even show the big picture, but I mean, I can imagine depending where you're walking from. These are golf courses. We walked around, Jake. Happens to the best of us, right?
Yep. Story for the ages.
This is a great photo of these. So, and this is Dr. J. Allen Hynek right here. Look at that. What a stoic photo, even if I didn't get it all in there for you guys. There he is. Colonel Sanders' cousin, for sure. We're not going to talk about that. So, the general vibe from Major Hector Quintanilla Jr. was to evaluate, analyze, and pressure from the brass because the Pentagon was having a fit at this point in time. And this is not a joke. They were having a fit because, again, I know we're talking about Michigan here. Go blue, right? But this was across the nation this was going on. And again, depending on how you feel and how you want to talk about things, there was not... nobody wanted this to be out just yet, okay? So this pressure is weighing down on them. Dr. J. Allen Hynek gets sent out to resolve this issue. Now, when he showed up to Selfridge Air Force Base, I've heard several different... different terms of information on how many cases he had to officially look at. Mm-hmm. Some have said between 12 and 20 legitimate cases that he should have looked at. But the two that because he shows up, it's just him, first of all. He shows up the 22nd, and Quintanilla Jr. wants answers within, he told him originally, I think he told him he was going to give him a week originally, but he was thinking he only had a week, right?
Yeah.
So he narrowed down these cases. He spent the whole day, the 22nd, with William Van Horn at the Selfridge Air Force Base, going over the cases and narrowed it down to the 2, which was the Frank Manor farm and the incident at the Hillsdale College, because these seem to have the most credible witnesses as far as law enforcement and the most just eyes on it naturally, okay? These other cases, unfortunately, guys, maybe Chad and I will we'll put some boots on the ground. Maybe we'll find these old cases that got swept away, because I'd be interested to hear what their stories were.
Me too.
But they got swept under the rug. They are literally, that we know of at this point in time, lost to the tail of time, right? Just gone. So, and I've also heard, and Chad and I discussed this a little bit, whether there's truth in this or not, it is said that Dr. J. Allen Hynek was recovering from a broken jaw. I don't know what happened there.
Right.
He actually did have a broken jaw. I'm sure I didn't get a chance to go and look up the medical records to see, did he indeed actually have a broken jaw? I can see where he is speaking at one point, and we'll play this later, where he was speaking. Most people with broken jaws get their mouth wired shut, especially back then. So maybe he was like post-recovery.
Right.
But some have said that he was in quite a bit of pain, and this was kind of his situation, okay? So, not defending him too much, but he was thrown underneath the bus because the whole first day he spent at the Selfridge Air Force Base. So, this goes into March 23rd, which is when he decides to finally go out and go to basically Frank Manor's farm. So this is where we're going to move on to Frank Manor's farm. And let me make sure. Yeah, so this is when he was meeting with the Washtenaw sheriff at the time. My goodness, what was his name? Why is that not on here? I would have thought I had that on there, guys. I was so prepared for you. Well, we're going to find that in a second. Yeah, I feel like it should be right there. Hang on a second. I'm going to find this because you guys deserve.
The sheriff?
Yeah. That it should be. Why wasn't it on there? That's a strange thing. Well, I had it highlighted at one point, but he's meeting with the sheriff, okay? Excuse me. And he's going over some of what's been going on and what they're looking at. So there's a photo of them. I know that if you go back, actually, Chad, let me do this because this will tell me. If you go back into our project and we pull up the photo over there, it'll tell me the name of the Police Chief Robert R. Taylor.
Oh,
Thank you. I knew I wrote it down.
I was like, for you.
I was like, there's no way I would have forgot to write that down. So Robert R. Taylor was the sheriff here, and he'd been taking a lot of these. He was the one who was. All the cases were getting flooded to him because of Washtenaw County. Good point brought up over there by Banana Booyah Boy. Men in Black punched him in the jaw. Perhaps right in the back of my head, I was like, what if he was like, talking a little too much or wasn't staying in line? I don't know what the deal was. And all I want to point out about this photo is, man, I just had that descriptive drawing there at the top corner where that criminal is. Those sideburns are strong. Oh, yeah. I can see them from here.
That was definitely somebody that didn't know how to draw very well.
Eddie Haskell, good grab there. You got the solid ashtray on the... I mean, come on.
This is just another guy, too. This is one of the guys in one of the interviews I showed.
Oh, my bad.
That didn't work.
Sorry, go ahead.
This dude here, Douglas Harvey. I don't know if you have him in your notes, but he was the former sheriff of Washtenaw County that was... also dealing with the case.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, should I play that part?
Oh, if you want it. I thought you were going to... Yeah, you can... Why not? We got to pull it up here. You can play a clip from him as well. Why not?
This is from the University of Michigan.
Fair use here, guys. Especially from Michigan.
Definitely for educational purposes.
My men seen most of the UFOs. The reports came to me naturally in the morning when I read the reports about a UFO being sighted by this one and that one and somebody different. And in fact, one of my officers, I remember him coming in and he took some pictures of the UFO.
Sheriff's Corporal David.
So yeah, he's the guy that like the officers had to report to. So the other officers, Fitzpatrick and what was the other guy's name? David Fitzpatrick and
well, there's Bushrow, there was Hunwell, but we had Robert Hunter and then Buford Bushrow, and then why am I laughing? I don't know. I was laughing at that.
Buford.
That's a guy's name. Okay.
Yeah, not many people have that name right now.
I shouldn't be laughing at the name Buford.
T. Justice.
Okay? That's the point. So anyways, he was here, and he was filtering through these cases. Okay, guys. So as he was filtering through these, he ended up going out to on the 20. Let's try and just refresh our dates here. So March 22nd, he shows up. He spends the whole day at Selfridge Air Force. 23rd, he goes out to the Dexter farm. It was a zoo. Things were going crazy. People were like, the news of this already spreading around. And then Frank Manor, we're going to talk about this in a minute here, but the story hadn't quite broke. They knew a lot about it, but a lot hadn't broke about it yet. So a lot of people wanted to be there. And, what was crazy about this is that the law enforcement officers that were supposed to be basically, you could say, crowd control, were also witnesses. So they want to share their story. And J.N. Hynek here, Dr. Hynek's trying to collect all the information. And they're telling their story. And he noted one thing that we'll talk about later on here for sure, is that he felt when somebody shared a story, Because remember, a lot of these other people, too, have seen sightings. So they're trying to share their story. Maybe they weren't as popular as this one, but, there's all these sightings going on. He noticed people were kind of, one-upping each other. It was like, oh, I seen some lights. And someone's like, oh, I seen 3 lights. And then it's turning into... So he's kind of got this crowd effect of people, just sharing and talking about stuff that may or may not be true. So as we move along here, this is kind of what was going on at the time. Now, look at this. I mean... The gentleman in the middle right there, that is just every 60s photo right there, I tell you what. But these are both officers, because remember just a second ago in the video you played, he talked about one of his officers having a photo, and it's the photo that gets the most talked about. He's actually handing it over to Hynek right here. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to remove something, I'm going to skip ahead here, I'm going to show this photo. It's not going to mean much to you guys, but this was the photo he handed Hynek. Okay? So he hands Hynek this photo. He was an officer. My goodness, they just said in the video we just watched a second ago who it was, and I just forgot. But he handed him this photo, and he was saying, hey, I captured this. And this was back on, I think, March 12th, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Almost a full week prior, to the Dexter sighting, or the incident there in Dexter. So let me take this back down, and then we're going to go back over here. So Hynek is dealing... Harvey. Thank you, Officer Harvey. So as you can see here, Officer Harvey's right here. I don't know if it's Buford or not, but I'm going to pretend that that's Buford right there behind Hynek. I just don't know if it's him or not, but I want it to be him.
Kind of looks like a Buford,
Oh, man. Over to the right here we have, I believe that is Officer Fitzpatrick, and that is actually an old photo from several years prior. In 1964, I believe it was, they chased a prisoner who had escaped jail. It was running through the sewers in Michigan, and they were barefoot and rolled up their pants. So they chased him through sewers. But really the only photos I could find of them. Over here on the left, guys, I apologize. The photos were not great from this era, and I really wish they would have documented them better. But you can see it says Frank Manor and Son at landing site in Michigan in 1966. So this is where there was a touchdown, and it did create a complete circle in the ground. And this photo, you can't tell that. It was a terrible photo, and there might be a better photo out there, and I really hope there is. But again, guys, this is so puzzling to me that you had Project Blue Book, Dr. J. Allen Hynek himself, and all these officers and all these people documenting this, and there's so few photos. I mean, it was a struggle to find some of this stuff. But just keep that in mind. This is kind of what he's dealing with. He, in quote, at one time, J. Allen Hynek said it was a zoo, is how he quantified it being there for basically the investigation, which was March 23rd at this point in time. So he's out there the whole day going over everything. He sees a lot of people one-upping each other. He sees the landing site, as it were, but there's not much more than that to go off of, right? So really at this point in time, he was just taking in people's accounts of what had happened. Now, something happens here as he's heading back to Selfridge Air Force Base. This is going into March 24th, so going into the 20th, actually it was that morning. So March 24th, that morning, he's on his way to Hillsdale College, right? And while he's on his way, Vivian West is escorting him around Michigan. That's kind of who's taking him to these different locations and sites and locale. And so as they're going along, Major Hector Quintanilla Jr. comes out and makes a statement because apparently the Pentagon was really weighing on him, and he just wanted to get this thing off his desk, right? He comes out and he made a direct quote to the news. Said, well, you know something? The investigations are really beginning to take shape, and we hope to have a reasonable explanation sometime tomorrow. Now, he gave that statement the 23rd, that evening. Frank had only looked at the Frank Manor farm. That was it. He hadn't even gone through the Hillsdale event yet. So you have him basically at this point in time, even if he was trying to do his due diligence, which who knows with Hynek, you have the upper brass, as it were, above him, basically telling people we're going to have an answer already. Even though he's only looked at two of the cases he boiled it down to, even though there's, like I said, some had said between 12 and 20 cases that he'd possibly been looking at there at the Air Force Base. So anyways, I do believe Hynek later was quoted when he was asked about that in regards to that particular statement. When that came out, he said it did me no good to protest, basically, Quintanilla. At one point, I do believe, if I remember correctly, he said that the flag of Imbialacy was flying at high mast. They're under Quintanilla's
Oh, is that what he said?
Yeah, let me find a photo here of Quintanilla. Here we go. This is Major Hector Quintanilla Jr. He was the head of Project Blue Book at the time, and this was a direct quote from him, by the way. This was another one. Anyone who believes in aliens is disconnected from our reality.
I mean, that's true.
He's not wrong, I suppose, right?
He's not wrong. Aliens
maybe it's interdimensional, bro.
Okay.
So, anyways, that is Major Hector Quintanilla Jr. And him and Hynek did not get along at all. But by the next morning, so he's heading to the farm, or excuse me, he's heading to the Hillsdale College. If you guys are staying with me, I know it's a little choppy here. March 24th, right? This is the newspaper clippings already by the 24th. Hillsdale residents probe area skies in search of UFO traffic. These are the kind of clippings that we went from. So you remember how earlier we had some clippings that were talking about weird sightings in the sky, and we can already start to see where it's now switched over to Hillsdale residents probe area skies in search of UFO, and this one posted Frank and his son in the picture, in the article. This led to some other things we're going to come back into, but needless to say, Frank, his family were severely harassed after this. To the point of people vandalizing their property. They had to pull the kids from school because of how much they were being bullied, to point to people confronting his wife just trying to grocery shop. We're going to cover some of that near the end, but it wasn't pretty. And you can already kind of see a little tongue-in-cheek here. It's a little funny, where someone was like, what if we throw in the words probe? You know what I mean? But just to give you an idea of, he's already trying to get to the college here, and we can already see the shift in, I would say, how they were feeling. I mean, what do you think? Am I reading too much on that, Chad? Check me out.
No, I don't think so. I mean, this also points to, this is a different case that we've covered before, but the same reaction was given to Chris Bledsoe and his whole family when they came out with it. They just wanted to be honest and upfront with it, and as soon as they did, the public, the community ridiculed them and said that they were full of it and making stuff up and trying to, it's actually after their documentary came out. When that came out, that's when the whole public was against them and ridiculed them, and that's when they lost their business. So this stuff happens. People didn't really want to come out with this at the time.
And that was in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? That case happened.
Yeah, I think it was, obviously way later.
Could be wrong on that. Yeah, not even close to 66. So, okay, so so he heads out there, and this is where, like I said, it gets a little weird on where things were at. So he goes to the college, and he takes the ladies' statements. He talks to Vivian West. Now, Vivian West, keep in mind, Vivian West is kind of basically driving around this time. He's talking to Vivian West about some stuff, and he's saying, listen, I've been doing this for a while, and again, you can't talk about everything, right? Working for Project Blue Book, but he's saying there's a lot of things out there that tell me that, basically just between him and Vivian, say, I do think something's going on. I do think that this demands more attention. This demands a better look, not only in this incident, but he said, across the board, that there is something going on. And he was pretty excited to get to the college because Vivian, who's driving him around, was there the night of it. So he was telling him about what had happened. And he gets there and he collects the information from the ladies who, had the written paperwork on, what they'd seen, how they tracked it, but no photograph. And so he was really hung up on this no photograph thing. Another thing that happened was some college students decided to pull a prank while he was there. Because, again, people were having fun with this. Fun, we'll use that as loose terms there, but fun. Exciting times, right? And a couple of them had flares. They shot up at night to mess with people. There was another one that supposedly talked about a craft landing because they were messing with people, and they'd put a trench coat and something else on a vacuum, because remember, you used to plug in corded vacuums, and they were wheel powered. They pull themselves. Yeah, this story's way... I've only heard two people talk about this one where they supposedly these college guys were pranking him, saying that they had found the alien, and that was what was going on. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but we do know that people were putting up flares. That was something that was going on. So,
Wayne and Michelle in the chat say it wasn't just Vivian; it was former President Gerald Ford before he was elected. They got on Blue Book's arse.
Oh yeah, and that's, we're definitely going to bring that up because that is something that I think is really cool. There was a lot that came from this, really. Like I said, this case, to me, I'm surprised why it's not covered more. I don't know. Why there's not more information, I should say, because it's really hard to get good information on this particular case. So anyways, March 24th, he wraps up the Hillsdale College. He collects the evidence he can. He sees people pranking him. That didn't help him. And as he's leaving with Vivian West, he tells him, I'm kind of at a loss. I don't have anything here. I've got, Quintanilla and the brass, as it were, coming down to me, telling me I'm already supposed to have answers out, even though I was supposed to have a week. And I don't have anything. One of the guys there hinted at something. I can't remember which officer it was. Oh, man, I should have wrote this down. Had hinted when he was at the Frank Manor farm. The one guy said, I thought when I was getting the calls originally, he just said this as in passing. He said, I thought when we were getting some of these calls that it could have been just swamp gas. Or will-o'-the-wisp is what they call it. And that kind of caught Hynek's attention because he was like, well, wait, what is that? And he told him, well, it's basically this gas, this methane that can burn, and you can get these light effects where you basically get a burning on the water that could cause it. And he goes, but, and he even said, this wasn't it because we've seen it going hundreds of feet in the air in yards and all this other stuff. But that was one point where when Dr. Jalen Hynek first hears this, and he did make a note of that. He then went to meet with a group of professors, specialists at the University of Michigan, 12 to be exact, all unnamed, who purposely put in there that they were to remain unnamed. So he met with them to discuss what he had as evidence. Going into this with Vivian, like I said, he was very undecided, I guess you could say, and had said essentially that he felt that there was a good chance something was going on. But unfortunately, coming out of that, he basically told Vivian, I've got my answer. We're meeting with, March 25th, they're going to meet with the Detroit Free Press to basically do this big, interview to give the answer to everybody what was going on and what had happened in Dexter. Really quick, Chad, if you don't mind, I'm going to see which video, because I know there was one I was going to have you play here in just a second.
I have the Gerald R. Ford one pulled up.
That's a good one, too. Let me see if... I think there might have been one right before... Yeah, go ahead and play the William Van Horn one, if you wouldn't mind. It's right after the ladies from college. So this is William Van Horn, who, again, is escorting Hynek around and was kind of one of the lead investigators, as you could say, in a sense, on this. He was the first person who was called out to the Manor farm. And some people question him why, because he, with his own eyes, seen this craft, and they wanted to know why he didn't maybe go after it a little more himself. And he kind of speaks to it just briefly in this special they did. I believe it was CBS, Walter Cronkite, right? Yeah. They did a special there to talk about what he had seen, and then we'll go with the one with Gerald R. Ford. But yeah, this is what was his answer in regards to why he didn't chase it, as it were.
If this one's not it, let me know. But
this is it. Yep.
Okay.
Next day, checking a mysterious perfect circle where the UFO had been seen. Van Horn did not find any radioactivity here, but this did not shake his certainty that he had seen a hovering vehicle with two lights. Many people ask him why he did not go right up to the UFO in the dark.
I'd much rather be a live coward than a dead hero. And with the area of uncertainty that we have here, how do I know but what maybe there's a current, a little electrical charge which is being radiated by one of these vehicles, which would electrocute you if you got within a certain area of it. There was no sound whatsoever. I could not hear a bit of sound.
The Air Force sent its chief scientific consultant on UFOs,
right, I think that might have been it.
Mr. J. Allen Hynek.
All right, so that was Vivian's take on it later in history, and yeah, we can also play. Well, actually, you know what? Let's do this before we do Gerald R. Ford's, because that's one of the rapper ones too. Let's go ahead and play the. Let's talk about what was going on here with Jalen Hynek giving the account at the Detroit Free Press, because people are freaking out. I shouldn't say freaking out. There was a bit of a frenzy and a panic in the streets, because again, some people are still thinking, is this Russians? Are we being invaded?
Right.
You know, that word kept getting tossed around a lot. And there were people who at this time, because of all the writing, was like, oh my gosh, are there aliens? What is going on? And Project Blue Book's here. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And this place was packed. for him to give his statement. So I've highlighted a couple areas, guys, and I will make sure before this episode is over, Chad and I, maybe we can, because we can edit this after we're done, right, Chad?
Yeah.
So if you're listening live to this now, or maybe we've, I shouldn't say live, but even live, or you listening and we've already finished this, we'll put in the links for this full episode because it is so cool to go back. And I think it's like 11 and a half minutes long or something, the full video, something like that. Maybe it's 8 minutes of him at the Detroit Free Press. We've kind of chopped it up for, fair use, guys, and to highlight some areas I thought were really interesting. So Chad, I believe the first one there from 106 to 144 is pretty interesting. And this is Dr. Hynek giving his accounts over there at the Detroit Free Press in regards to what he witnessed and what he was looking at.
Oh, I have to share it.
It's good stuff. I'm so excited.
They're right. 106.
Yes,
cases at Dexter and at Hillsdale. I am not. Here's one part I do want to read. I want it clearly understood that I'm not making a blanket statement to cover the entire UFO phenomenon over the past 20 years in this and other countries. I'm discussing only the Dexter and Hillsdale sightings, and then only that material which I have been able to sift down and to that which forms a consistent picture.
Doctor, could you face this way more?
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
And that's where it cuts off.
Right.
I believe that's 144. Yeah, that's where it cuts off. So now that was his, and I think that's important to at least note because that's what he's trying to make it clear. Listen, and like I said, because he does something here that ends up being really a stain on his career, I guess you could say. Well, for those that are a fan of the idea of UFOs. For those that are not, well, they probably think he made the right call. But for those that believe or are believers or want to believe, this is one of those things that he always kind of regretted in his history and the relationship of covering the topic. Let's see. I think the next part, Chad, is from
203.
Yeah, that's the one. All right. Now this part I thought was pretty interesting. Alrighty.
I keep forgetting that I set the setting to
like autoplay. No worries.
For instance, yesterday there was released to the press, and I want to make this completely clear that this has nothing whatsoever to do with the two cases I'm discussing. This picture was released of the rising moon and Venus. This was taken not at the time
Go ahead and pause this for a second, Chad. All right, so he's referring to this. Look at this. This is the famous photo. Well, this is another one. First of all, that drawing. Come on.
My Jesus.
That's a house on the left.
Wow.
There's a swamp. I think there's trees. There's squiggly lines across the top. That looks like something I would draw. I'm not going to lie. That is a Big Willie drawing right there.
Yep, me too.
That is it. But yeah, he's referring to this photo. This is what he's about to discuss, okay? Because remember the officer that drew this, he's about to go over what he's seen. Because remember, he didn't even get this photo until he was at Frank Manor's farm. I think I have another photo on the slide forward. Yeah, here's where he's holding it, which is in regards to the actual video we're witnessing right now. And if I go one more, here we go. Yeah.
Jeez.
So these was what was shared with CBS Evening News back in the day when that one broadcasted. But this is the photo that was taken. Okay, now this has become the epitome. If you look up, the year the UFOs invaded Michigan, 1966, this is the photo you're going to see time and time and time again. And for whatever reason, you will not see that original photo that we started with in the very beginning, which they just didn't even talk about it.
Right? Yeah, they don't really talk about it at all.
He never addresses it in the count because he writes it off as a separate event. Remember, he said, I'm only addressing these two cases. So remember, all the other cases that were presented to him at Selfridge Air Force Base, he said, I don't have the time. Let's focus on these two.
Yep.
So I just thought it was worth, because he's going to be talking about that photo a little more in depth. So I just thought it was worth at least showing before we watch the whole clip on it. So one last time, this was the exposed original photo of what it looked like, and then him holding it here.
That's
so let's see what he's
claiming is Venus and the moon.
Venus and the moon. You said any comparable, if I remember correctly, his exact words were any astrology or astrologist worth their grain of salt or comparable astrologists would know this is Venus and the moon. You guys can determine yourselves.
The way that I see it, though, is like if that was a time exposure of the, because I believe that's what he says, is it's a time exposure of Venus and the moon.
Yep.
But personally, I believe that if the shutter was open that long to bring in that much light. To get it to move that far, I believe the film would probably be blown out from those lights on the bottom.
Yep.
But anyway, here's the... you want to play the rest of that video?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hillsdale sighting. It was taken several days earlier, not in the evening, but at 5 in the morning at Milan, Michigan, not in Dexter or Hillsdale. This shows you how these sort of investigations can get completely mixed up. Milan.
Yeah.
Is that the end of that? 2:36?
Yep. I do believe that was... I believe that's right. I'll keep an eye on it for myself, though. I apologize. I probably should let you... But yeah, 2:03 to 3:30 on that one, right?
Oh, to 3:30. Okay, we'll just keep on going there. Sorry about that.
An M-I-L-A-N. Milan, Michigan.
Milan, Michigan.
Not in a swamp, not anywhere near a swamp.
Not in a swamp.
This is, without question, Venus and the moon. Any competent astronomer would confirm that. However, I don't want you saying that the Air Force is trying to cover up with a picture of Venus and the moon. This has nothing to do with the Hillsdale and Dexter cases, but it was thoroughly confused by the release made yesterday. Similarly, in Hillsdale, there have been recently, again, nothing to do with the sighting of March 21st. Several boys have been purchasing flares and using those.
Purchasing flares and using those.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he goes on to try to cover it up even more.
Well, I mean, and that did happen. Now, I would say, and everybody can make their own determination, he does seem a little nervous. Watch how many times he's kind of rubbing his head. He's under a lot of pressure, okay? The next clip, I believe, is from 4 minutes to 6 minutes. And this one's a long one, guys, but I think it's so worth it. And then it'll kind of wrap up the last little bit. But it's from 4 minutes to 6 minutes, and then from 6 minutes to 7 minutes, 7 minutes and 45 seconds. But I figured we'd cut it up just in case for fair use. I don't know if we have to put that up again or not, Chad, but
sure, we can.
Yeah.
Said that I am, after all, an astronomer and not a chemist. And I pointed out that swamps are not the normal province of the astronomer. He usually has his eyes trained toward far loftier places. Yet the famous Dutch astronomer Mannor, in his book Light and Color in the Open Air, has this to say about swamps. He describes lights that have been seen in swamps by the astronomer Bessel and other excellent observers. The lights, he says, resemble tiny flames, sometimes seen right on the ground, sometimes floating above it. The flames go out in one place and suddenly appear in another, giving the illusion of motion. No heat is felt. The lights do not burn or char the ground. They can appear for hours, this is all a quotation, they appear for hours at a time and sometimes for a whole night. Generally there is no smell and usually no sound except the popping sound of little explosions such as when a gas burner ignites. This is precisely what was observed there. There were yellow, green, and red lights that always were around a definite locale. They moved up and down and sideways, but they were always there at the at that particular locale. In the Dexter swamp, for instance, while Mr. Manor and his friends were observing the glow from their porch,
officers
Fitzpatrick and McFadden were over on the other side of the swamp. They saw the glow to the south, he saw it to the north. It was very well pinpointed.
Didn't any of these people actually see a definite shape, though, Doctor?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Ooh, good question.
Got that covered here someplace.
I got that excuse here
somewhere. The majority of observers in both cases have reported only lights, red, yellow, and green, silent, glowing lights near the ground. They have not described an object. Even the only two observers who did describe an object have stated that they were no closer than 500 yards, better than a quarter of a mile. Now, I doubt that one could make out much detail at that distance at night. It was a dark night, no moon, and by the way, the winds were fairly calm, which would...
That is a good point. It was super dark, no moon that night. So the only things that you'd really see are the lights.
And that's what's weird about that photo release, that it was Venus and the moon, maybe because it was almost a week prior. Maybe it was just a half moon. I don't know. Was that the 7:45 cutoff? I don't know if it was or it wasn't on that.
Oh, no, we'd still have a little bit more to go on that.
Oh, okay. Well, you can pull it, because there was only, I think he has one more thing he's going to say, that there's a 7:45, and then I promise, guys, we'll wrap it up. But I just, these, like, there's no way for me to word it. I mean, literally listen to him say what he said.
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to do any better than that. So...
Be again conducive to this sort of thing.
Well, Doctor, isn't it the nature of swamp gas to remain close to the ground, and especially during a thunderstorm, wouldn't that keep it down?
He's like, I don't know.
Some of these witnesses have told us that they've seen it hundreds of yards in the sky.
Hey, Chad,
Some
pause it
one
real
or
quick.
two witnesses did.
Okay, so several things going on here. One, these guys asked some pretty good questions, okay?
Yeah.
They were like, well, hang on a second there, doctor. Now, you hear how the phones are ringing in the background? People were already running with his answer of swamp gas, and they were already typing stuff up. Everybody wanted to be first.
Yeah.
Chad, you know what might be fun, too? I don't even know if you can pull it up, but we have some videos of what swamp gas looks like, guys, if you want, Chad. Maybe we'll play that and then come back to this and finish up. Because, guys, in case you don't know what swamp gas is, let us play a video of what he's blaming this on. Again, remember, we talked about people saying they've seen things the size of a house, a small house over them, going, 1,500 feet in the air down to 500 feet. A lot of movement, okay? And things that lasted very long, which, will o' the wisp, as it can sometimes be called, or swamp gas, can last all night, like he was talking about. But I just want to show you, I have two videos that I believe we'd send over to Chad that give an idea of what swamp gas looks like. And you guys you do make your own determination. We're just going to show it, and you guys tell us if you think this is what they've seen that night. So he captures the methane there off the top of the lake, or the swamp.
Which is actually pretty cool.
It is cool
that you can do this. But
you really got to do it.
How are you? I mean, you're talking. This is at swamp level,
and you can hear,
level.
And you can hear a little bit of obviously it burning, right? But
it's not hundreds.
It's only going to burn. It's only going to burn what you push down in that bowl too. It's not like it, I think there's one other one that might show a little bit more, so maybe we'll pull that one up. But that's one idea of manually catching the swamp gas. So this is, that was a manual forcing of swamp gas. Saying I was going to check out swamp gas videos. Yeah, and there's more than this. We don't want to bore you guys too much with, just showing them over and over. But to me, these are some of the, just to give you an idea of what it looked like. I believe they were sent together, so they should be in the messenger really close to each other.
Video. I'm just trying to find the spot in the video.
Oh, I got you. I do apologize. I didn't put timestamps on those ones. All right. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's Will o' the Wisp. Now, this is a video you guys can still go look up. This gives so go up a couple above this, Chad. This video just talked about the history of Will o' the Wisp.
Oh, okay.
So that was for our research purposes. I apologize, guys. Listen, we're still trying to figure this thing out, okay? So I believe it's the one above that one. But that video is worth looking up if you guys want to really look into what swamp gas is and is about. It's called Will o' the Wisp. But here's another video. This is a great video of them lighting it up. So this is another quick version of it. You might have to unmute it here, Chad. I think it's muted. There we go. So when they finally light this sucker up,
you gotta do it fast. Right there.
This is how quick it can burn sometimes.
Gotta get closer.
Oh, wow. See, that is not a UFO, though.
No, that's pretty easy to see. And look how fast it kind of burns up.
And somebody had to light it.
That was awesome.
Yes. Now, again, in that Will o' the Wisp video, it has been documented that over time, orbs have been spotted in swamp areas that were produced from methane. See how that one's still continuing to burn?
Can't get to the water.
You can have ball effects where it seems to do that. What I would argue is you're not going to have ball effects at 1,500 feet in the air, which is, in conclusion with the other video we're watching there, as far as him essentially writing this up because he met with those 12 professors, learned about Will o' the Wisp or the swamp gas, and basically wrote that down along with this drawing. He was like, over here at the swamp when the people met at the house. He didn't sound
over
like
here,
that. Clearly we know what he sounds like. He was a very smart guy, and I respect him. I have a ton of respect for him. But he really didn't have a good showing on this particular incident. And especially, like I said, with him kind of chalking these photos up here as just being Venus and the moon. Not his best look, I guess we could say. But I know we have just a couple more videos to share with you guys. I think maybe 3 more, something like that. 2 more. And we'll just about be ready to wrap up. And maybe we can take some listener questions even, too, and see what people in the chat's thinking about this one tonight. But so far, with where we're at, guys, you're giving us a thumbs up scale of 1 to 10, 10 being this happened. real UFOs or one being like, this was all made up swamp gas. Where are you guys at? Go ahead and throw a number in the chat for us. And then, Chad, I think if you want, you don't have to play the rest of that 745 one, but maybe play the 851 to 1035 one at least. Just let it finish out there.
All right.
And then after that, we will have the Gerald R. Ford one, which is, because that'll be the last part of our story where we wrap up with where things went.
It says 850 this turn?
I do believe so, 851 to 1035.
All right.
I don't know, Vinny, honestly. I just don't.
Doctor, I wonder if you would take a look at this picture and tell me if that is a flying saucer or not.
Well, this is certainly reported to be a picture of a flying saucer, but this, what can you tell about this? How was it taken? Under what conditions? This looks to me very much like a chicken feeder with a brooder, the lights underneath it. And
hold it up, Doctor.
Anyone can fake things.
Doctor, you said that these marsh gases are silent, yet there was sounds described as a ricocheting bullet by at least one of the witnesses.
Yes, by one of the witnesses, there was that description, although I didn't say it was silent. I said in the statement here that it's frequently like a popping noise as the gas ignites. Now, whether popping can be described, let's remember in this thing that I am not talking about the whole subject of UFOs. I was sent here to check these two particular cases. And the whole subject of UFOs, I pointed out, I think, and I have, let me mention here, that I have recommended in my capacity as scientific consultant that competent scientists quietly study such cases when evidence from responsible people appears to warrant such study. There may be much of potential value to science in such events. We know a very great deal more about the physical world in 1966 than we did in 1866. But by the same token, the people in the year 2066 may regard us as very incomplete in our scientific knowledge. We must not, in our haste to have answers, be Freddie Smith. Now, somebody ask me who Freddie Smith was, please. All right,
there you go.
Who is Freddie Smith?
So,
Frederick Smith.
I feel in the end there, and the only part that we missed a little bit, then I can just tell you about, was he said, because somebody asked him, well, weren't there hundreds of witnesses? He said, listen, I had to work with the statistical numbers, and I believe it was like in the last 745 of it or something. But he basically said, actually, if you wouldn't mind, Chad, maybe the one with Ford we'll do next. Gerald R. Ford. But he basically said, these were the numbers I had to work with, and I had to eliminate other things. So I just wanted to point it out that he wasn't denying that there was other stuff. He just said, listen, these are the two cases I had to work with. Even though we don't like that he came out with swamp gas, he did say, this isn't to cover UFOs as a whole, but this started a whirlwind fire, guys. When this happened, this went up the line. When this became out the official report, and like I said, the news and everything got put out there, it got a lot of people involved, which including at the time our U.S. Congressman Gerald R. Ford, who later became president. And Chad has a great video here we're going to play, and this was his feelings and thoughts on it.
Flying saucers, you've had some in Michigan in the past week. Do you really believe in flying saucers? You've called for a congressional investigation.
Dave, we've had several incidents in Michigan in the last week, incidents that many reliable, good citizens felt were sufficient to justify some action by our government, and not the kind of flippant answer that was given by the Air Force where they passed it off as a swamp gas.
The Congress should investigate the rash of reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in southern Michigan and other parts of the country.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, he's good on him because he was in the political spotlight. He was in 66, as again, guys, putting our time and era, not the time to be the UFO guy. Matter of fact, I have in my old William notes here. From some stuff he said, which was Gerald R. Ford's exact explanation, as well as William Van Horn. William Van Horn immediately after the press conference. Matter of fact, he was still there when his opinion was taken. He said, and I quote, "I know what swamp gas is. It was not that, and deserves to be investigated." And then obviously Gerald R. Ford, as you just heard, they're talking about giving me a flippant answer, but he said it was a sham report and asked them to do their investigation. And then later, as we've seen there, went a little bit more further in depth. And a matter of fact, guys, there was a hearing by the United States House and Committee Service, or excuse me, House Armed Service Committee. So this ended up going up the line because people were, quite frankly, so pissed off to be disregarded, even with their photos. And like we said, that what about that initial photo, even with him coming in and getting involved here? Look at the man, stern look, huh? Stern look there. Getting involved in this.
Yeah, he has to answer to the people, and they have a lot of questions and a lot of answers. So.
Exactly. That literally is the epitome. I should have put that as a caption. Love it. WTF, bro.
He's like, WTF is going
on? So at this point, later on, this is where, at the very end of that clip that we just played a second ago, we heard the thing saying that there should be an investigation into this. There was another audio clip from J.L. and Hynek, as well as I believe Vivian West talked about this as well, saying that there needs to be an actual investigation, and it needs to be separate from basically it needs to not be funded by the government. Okay,
right.
And this is where there was an investigation that was called, and it was by the United States House Armed Services Committee. How long do you think that this lasted, by the way, Chad? If you had to guess, how long do you think the investigation lasted, and how many people were called upon, if you had to guess?
If I had to guess, probably 5 days. 5
days? How many people do you think were called forward as witnesses?
I'm gonna guess 6.
6? You're not far off, bro. So the investigation lasted 1 day, April 5th, 1966. With 3 witnesses.
That's all we're giving you.
The witnesses were Secretary of the Air Force Harold Brown, who was known to be a company man, toe the line. Wow. And you can see that in his face. You can just see he was a company man. Am I judging a little? Maybe. But I'm just going to say it. He was known to be. It's true. And then you also had another one that was added to there was this gentleman. Quote, anyone who believes in aliens is disconnected.
You're disconnected from reality.
He was the second person to be called before the United States House Armed Services Committee. So far you got toe the line, company man, right? You had Quintanilla, and then the last one that was called forth to testify into regards to what was going on was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So those were the 3. Hynek was the only one who really put it out on the line, as it were. So this is what happened. It said Harold Brown said, there are 48 cases that make no sense, but Air Force has this. Basically, like, this was his answer. He said there's 48 cases in regards to Project Blue Book that don't really make sense, but don't fear. Essentially, we've got this covered. So don't worry yourself. And then he struck this mean pose, and they took pictures. And that was he was like, that's right. It says Quintanilla Jr.'s answers were deceptive in his answers and evasive. I don't know what all that exactly means, but they were deceptive and evasive. Mm-hmm. And then Hynek, at the press conference after, said, I am a puppet and we need, literally said those words, I am a puppet and we need an investigation that is not funded by the U.S. Air Force or the military or even the government. He wanted a private sector, something that was basically separate completely from them.
Right.
Which they did.
So interesting.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just so interesting that was coming from him. Like, he's supposed to be a government dude and a doctor.
I'm trying to think of when 66, I want to say, I could be wrong on the numbers here, guys. I want to say Project Blue Book wrapped up by 69, maybe a little before some of this. So this was near the end anyways.
It was right near the end, yep.
Yeah, but yeah, for him to come out and just say it like that. So the government actually did come out and say, hey, we'll give you... we're going to fund this. We will fund any college that wants to dedicate time to investigate this. And they couldn't get anybody at all together to investigate it. And it took a long time. And a matter of fact, it took, I want to say, it was March 26, 1974. So it took a very long time for them to get together on this to finally talk about what ended up being studied, which was a gentleman named Edward Condon. And as many of you probably heard in the past or heard of it, the Condon Committee
report.
Or the Condon report as well. Yeah, that was formed there. So, and at that point, I'm just going to pull up really quick if you don't mind. I'm just going to pull up a photo of, oops, my bad. of Mr. Edward Condon himself. Look at this man's face.
What a man.
What a man. Let's read just a hair about him. He was born... He was born March 2nd, 1902. I mean, that's not actually... I'm trying to see. I think it's saying that he died March 26th, 1974. So he didn't live much longer than us, actually.
Right.
So his background, Edward was born on March 2nd, 1902 in New Mexico. We don't have to talk a whole lot about that. I wanted to see his career. Here we go. Condon taught briefly at the Columbia University and was associate professor at physics at Princeton University from 1828 to 1937, except for a year at the University of Minnesota. He wrote Quantum Mechanics, the first English language text on the subject in 1929, which quantum mechanics, guys, I'm not going to take away from his ability as a physicist at all. He did some groundbreaking work. It's not to knock on that. Where I have an issue with him, and I apparently didn't have it pulled up here, was the exact verbiage, and I'm going to pull it up because it's key, is the way that it was there was some specific wording in the Condon Committee, or the Condon Report, that talked about any and all reports henceforth in studies. And by the way, the study ended up being funded by the U.S. Air Force. So even though he was like, we should not do it that way, they were like, yeah, okay, so who wants the money? And eventually this is what came of it. I don't know why I'm not pulling it up. But anyways, in there, where I have an issue with the Condon Report is that it states, like, henceforth, any and all studies must go through the Condon Committee, which eliminated so many numbers from what Project Blue Book originally had, and basically cut it down to nothing, and then from there on forth had to go through that. And if it didn't pass the hoops that you had to jump through for this, that was pretty much it. Oh my gosh. Good evening, gentlemen. Hairy Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks. That is a sexy name. So sexy. All right. So this is what happened there, and this was studied at, obviously, the University of Colorado is where that was formed and done. And that is a beautiful campus.
Oh, yeah.
Just want to say. Now, guys, we are coming to our closing here on this one. And again, each of these things could have deserved more attention. This was, more or less Chad and I's attempt to try and do some justice for our good old state that we both hail from. And I think it's an absolutely fascinating story. One thing I'd love to leave us with before we do some closing thoughts, and obviously, Chad, it's your show, so whatever you want to do this way, but there is a great video here that I think when I listened to this, when I was, in the research, this part of the video, I have to admit, I was like this close to shedding a tear. Like, cause it really bothered me for what Frank and his family went through. Remember how we said earlier that it's not fun to come out and talk about UFOs, maybe even today, but especially back then. Chad, maybe we'll just play the video and let them hear in his own words what he went through with his family, because it was a lot.
Yeah, because you can definitely feel the emotion coming from him in this video. So this is a great clip. Let me just pull this up.
Frank Manor, the Michigan farmer who had brought in the first report, was caught in the middle. He was mad.
Well, you can look at here. Look, beer bottles thrown. Look at my windshield. What would you think if somebody was throwing beer bottles at your house, standing out in the middle of the road screaming, you nut, you're fanatic, and all that? What would you think?
Are you sorry now that you did tell people what you saw?
Yes, I am. I am sorry, because not that it's not the truth, but it's just the idea, the reaction of the people. They think you're a nut, tell you the truth. That's just what they figure you are. And I'm not going to take it no more. I don't want nobody down in here. I just leave me alone. And if the thing lands right there by that pump, I'd never say a word. Then he got out and talked to me. I wouldn't tell nobody. That's just the way I feel. I'm bitter and disgusted in the whole matter. And if people's going to act like that, I hope one lands right in Ann Arbor, right in the middle of Detroit.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think this gets overshadowed sometimes as much as an excitement. I love sharing these stories. We sometimes still forget that there are real people with real feelings, no matter what they saw or didn't see, that are affected. And to me, I think that just shows what he went through. I mean, because who knows? For all we know, him and his family have had sightings since. For all we know, it's similar to what everyone else is going, like you talked about before with the Bledsoe family having a hot spot. Oh, thank you guys so much, Eddie Haskell. For all we know, they've had this going on in their family there, and we just don't know about it. Because, like he said in that video, even if it got out and landed and talked to me and stood me at that pump, I wouldn't tell anybody. Which always makes me wonder, like, man, did he see something else? So, anyways, really quick, here's a final picture. Let's give maybe some of our closing thoughts. Chad, unless you got something else you want to show there. I just wanted to show Dexter again. I couldn't help it. It's a great photo. Just the vehicles, man. So much style, so much character.
We did have a question from John Zevrel, who I work with. So him and I both have a connection here to Dexter.
Oh, yes. Here, I'll drop this and let you pull that up.
John would like to know exactly where it is. So I pulled up a map on Google Maps. So for anyone familiar with this area, John, you would obviously know that this is Dexter down here, the town of Dexter. Here's the A&W right there.
Mm-hmm.
So you take Dexter Pinckney Road out here, and then you would go left here on Fleming Road.
Good old Fleming.
And then here's McGinnis. So this is the road that they claim you go down all the way at the end of McGinnis, which today there's a house that sits there. So we're not completely sure, but there does happen to be some water back here and maybe a swampy area back in this direction. But it does say that it was at the end of McGinnis. So this is definitely going to be an area that me and Willie want to do some sky watching at pretty soon here. So it does look like this McGinnis Road is a private drive.
It is, yeah.
But maybe we could just chill right here at this intersection or maybe a different intersection and see what we can see. You know, maybe we can recreate the incident. You never know.
You never know. I just, for me, and maybe we'll get, again, I know a lot of you already just rated that out there, guys, but seeing all the evidence now, what we've laid out for you tonight, would you say, you know, scale 1 to 10 for yourself, Chad, and everybody else, and feel free to rate again, guys, if you haven't, 10 being the most and 1 being not, and give an explanation if you'd like. Where are you guys at? But for Chad, for yourself, where are you at with this story?
Well, I mean, after being in this community for over a year and listening to everybody else's accounts on what they've seen in the sky, I definitely think that there's obviously something to this. People are seeing these lights in the sky. Every now and then they are coming down to ground level and, you know, landing or at least putting an impression in the ground, showing that they were there at some point.
Yeah.
So I do think that people are seeing these things, and there's just a mystery there that we're just too dumb to understand so far. I think humanity is just too young, and we're in our infancy of knowing what this stuff is. So I think there's definitely something going on, and we just have to look more into it.
Yeah, there's, you know, and I just thought of, I apologize. I just remembered this last story here, guys, that I'll share with you quickly. This was in regards to Milan or Britain, Michigan, one of the two. There was a story, talking about the stories that got swept under the rug. There was one where there was 4 teenagers out just cruising, as you would in the 66, right? And supposedly one of these crafts chased them for like 3.5, 4 miles down the road until they got to the city. And that's one of those stories that, like, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but it's so many of those cases just being swept under the rug, it's hard to know. But like I said, there's got to be more of those stories out there that just, if they'd taken them all in and put it together, I think the evidence would have been overwhelming. Personally, I mean, to date, the official report for what happened is swamp gas. That is on the official Blue Book's record that
Swamp
it was
gas.
Willow of the Wisp. That the pictures, and again, I mean, how can we forget? They didn't even give an answer. Those initial photos that we had from the very beginning, the very first ones taken by Officer Hunwell, something like that. Let me pull this up here. They didn't even give an answer to this one.
Yeah, that's the one that it just gets swept under the rug like never happened.
Right.
But
So again, like I said, there was all these events going on, and they just kind of got swept away. And then even with people being able to put out, you know, pretty decent drawings of this, a pretty, I mean, in my opinion, this is someone who got much closer than, you know.
Yeah, and that's the sports model. If you know of from I almost said Bob Berkins.
Bob Berkins.
Bob. How come I can't think right now? Huh.
Well, there's Billy Bob Thornton.
Who's the
We're
Michigan?
just not going through the Bobs.
Who's the Michigan dude that worked out at Area 51? Bob.
Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar. Thank you, Spooky
Lazar,
Morales.
man.
But yeah, this is the same sports model
Right,
drawing,
Jenny.
basically, that he drew up, that he saw out at Area 51. So it's the same shape that people are reporting everywhere else. Hey, Papa Willie, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah. Papa Willie in the house.
John Zavrell said that he's seen lots of swamps in Dexter. He's been all over at all times of the year, and he has never seen swamp gas.
Mm-hmm. Yep, like I said, so if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for being with us. If you wouldn't mind, share with a friend. If you're listening in a podcast format through Spotify or wherever you're listening to this on, share it out. If you know somebody from Michigan and maybe you're listening and you have a friend or a buddy in Michigan or whoever, send it on out. Please subscribe.
Please subscribe to the channel you're listening to. Really appreciate that. Hit the like button. That really helps get the algorithm to make it show up on other people's screens.
Like I said, and if anybody is listening to this way in the future and we found more relevant evidence, you find a good link, share the link in the comments so that people can research that. That's the main thing I want. I just want things for people to read and research and enjoy, because this kind of stuff it's what I love doing. I know a lot of people get caught up in all the current stuff, but man, do I just love sharing some of these old stories because they're fascinating.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I would say, Chad, and it's obviously your channel, so feel free to stop me if you think it's wrong. But if you guys have a story maybe you want us to cover from the great state of Michigan, Chad, what do you think? I mean, should we have people email you or?
Yeah, let us know. This is definitely something that we want to continue doing because we're both from Michigan, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happened throughout the years around here with the Great Lakes and everything being surrounding the state that we're in here. So if you have any cases that you guys are familiar with that you want us to cover, please email us at chadsmithpodcast@gmail.com, or if you know how to hit us up on Messenger, just let us know that you guys have a case that you want us to cover, and we'll continue checking out these cases from Michigan.
Heck yeah. And as Big Willie always says when he's taking off, my friends, stay curious, right?
Keep it
wait,
weird.
That's not right. Hang on. Let's start this over. It's been so long since I've said it. We're going to reset. You guys didn't see that part. Chad's going to cut this out.
Yeah, we'll just do the record scratch.
There we go. What do I normally say? I'm drawing a blank. It's like,
keep it weird. Stay weird.
Stay curious and keep it weird. That's what I say. Had to think about it, dude. That means I've been staying out of the game for too long. I got to get back to this thing.
Long,
my
dude.
Gosh. Yeah,
all right,
stay
we'll see
curious.
you guys next time. Stay
weird.
Curious, keep it weird, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.